All right, guys, welcome to another exciting episode of How I Built This, Birmingham style. Of course, I'm Ron, CEO and founder of this little tiny cleaning company called Two Maids and a Mop that turned into a big brand with 90 locations across the country. And it's not hard to figure out. We're also trying to build another brand called Pink Zebra Moving. So today we have Betsy McAtee. She is the president and the daughter of the original founders of Dreamland Barbecue. I'm interviewing one of Birmingham's entrepreneurial legends in my mind. She is pretty famous around the Birmingham area, and more than likely you've been a customer of hers at some point. Ashley McMakin is the guest. Most of you guys know her as Ashley Mack. Cindy Martin is the founder of Beham Now. Prior to starting Beham Now, she was the CEO of Alabama Media Group, which a lot of people don't know this, but they own all sorts of newspapers across the country. And of course, being the big one, AL.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, we were actually founded in 1958 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, by Mr. John Bishop. He also was called Big Daddy because he was rather large in size. And he was a brick mason by trade and wanted to provide a better living for his family. So he felt like he had a calling and a dream, and it was to build a neighborhood cafe on the hillside beside his home, which he did. And like a lot of neighborhood cafes back in the 50s, he sold everything from hamburgers, hot dogs, canned soda, to postage stamps, to candy. But what he saw through the years was he would sell out of his ribs. And he, like a true entrepreneur, he said, I'm just going to sell ribs. So for many years, he sold ribs, white bread, barbecue sauce, canned soda, and bags of chips. And that was it. And through a friendship with my father, Bobby Underwood, and Mr. Bishop, that's how I got here today and how we're talking today.
Well, that sounds very similar to my most recent mill at Dreamland. We've had people come in from across the country to learn more about our franchise opportunity. You name it, from Southern California to New York City to South Florida. And they come to Birmingham, and number one, they almost always know about Dreamland. But number two, they come in and they get the white bread, and they're like, what do we do with this? The Northerners and the folks from outside the Southeast they don't know that's an appetizer.
Right. You got to have that. It has to be white bread, right? Full on white bread with no whole wheat in there at all, and barbecue sauce, and you just dip it in there, and as they say, ain't nothing like them nowhere.
That's right. They are fantastic. So, all right. So let's talk about the business. I know that you came in, I believe, in the 90s. They took over leadership.
Right.
And your parents were a little bit before you. So tell me, do you know any fun stories from those early days when they were really trying to ramp this up to something bigger than just a small business?
Sure. So I moved to Birmingham in 1992. And my father opened the store on Southside here in Birmingham in 1993. And at the time, I was working for Frito-Lay. I had moved up here with my job with Frito-Lay, selling potato chips. So I like to tell people I've had 3 jobs in my life: selling pantyhose, selling potato chips, and selling pork. So that's where we are now. And we opened in May of 93. And when we first opened, we didn't know really what to expect. I know there was an appetite for Dreamland outside of Tuscaloosa. And when we first opened, we used to have to close in the middle of the day between 2 and 5 to catch back up because ribs take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to cook. So it's not, you can't just put a slab of ribs on and be ready to go in 5 minutes. So we would have to completely shut down during those times and kind of get back built back up to be able to be ready for the dinner.
Well, and you can't collect revenue, right? When you're closed from 2 to 5.
No, you can't collect, but it gave us a chance to catch up. But on the very first day we opened, we didn't really know what to expect. I mean, we ran out of toilet paper. We're running, to the grocery store, to Sam's, buying toilet paper. I mean, it was, looking back on it, it was a comedy. It really was. It was, but we made it through, and the people of Birmingham have been so supportive and been supporting us ever since.
Right. So how many locations do you guys have today?
Today, there are 10 locations, 7 in Alabama, 2 in Metro Atlanta, and 1 in the Panhandle of Florida.
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in a family that loves to cook. So food was just kind of always on our radar, whether it's the big Southern, holidays, and cooking with my mom in the kitchen with my grandmother. And so really, even through high school, loved to cook for my friends. Went to the University of Alabama, Roll Tide.
There you go.
And got a degree within their business school. And my dad gave me that advice of just, if you're not sure what you want to do, go to business school, and Alabama has a good one. And so I majored in marketing and advertising. And there I met my husband, who was in accounting, which ended up coming very much in handy starting a business.
Sure.
Didn't know that at the time. But when we got engaged, I started catering some for my grandmother. And she would have big parties and whatnot. And so I remember I was living at home at the time and cooked chicken salad for 100 people and did these little tea sandwiches, cakes, pies, the whole works. And that next day after the party was over, I remember coming home and telling my mom, I'm never doing this again. This was so hard, so much work. I remember I was just a hot mess. I made the food, took the order, delivered the food, And so I was like, I don't know, that it seemed like food. I love food, love to cook. That would be a good idea. But I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And so I actually did look at to go into culinary school when my husband and I got married. And then we realized we were broke newlyweds. And so I needed to get a paying job.
Yeah.
And so I got a job at an advertising agency. And it was there that I met a girl that was in a little cubicle next to me that loved to cook as well. And so we would kind of talk about, we were newlyweds and just loved to go home and cook for our husbands. That was back when that was real exciting. And so we would talk about all of our, just kind of family recipes or things that we like to cook. And we said, why don't we start a little business? It was very much, very much a hobby. Just, this would be fun to do on the side, So we made our own little business cards. It was called The Taste of Birmingham at the time. And so one of my best friends is a drug rep, and she had always knew I loved to cook and was like, make your chicken salad and let me take it to my drug reps. Like, they'll love it. And so my very first lunch was for 7 box lunches for this doctor that's still a customer of ours. And we would cook at night and then go on our lunch break to deliver. And kind of word started getting out once we did it for a few drug reps. And then my uncle worked at the time at Vulcan Materials, which is a huge company in Birmingham. And so he kind of got me in on their daily, they would order just lunch for 50, almost every day of the week, these different departments. And so after doing this for a couple months, I was gone delivering a lunch, came back to this advertising agency, and I got called into the boss's office. and she said, I know you and your friend, y'all are doing this business. I'm happy for you, but you were gone for 2.5 hours at lunch. So we just, you can't do that. And now looking back, I was 23 years old, and now looking back, I'm just like, oh my gosh, now being an employer. But, and they were very gracious, and they just kind of basically said, you need to, either be here or if you need to pursue this other business. And so I went home, told my husband I got in trouble at work, and was like, what should I do? And, he was like, at this point, we were actually doing some decent sales for doing it out of our home. And he was like, I think you should just keep doing, leave the advertising agency, keep doing this. And so that's what I did. And so we kind of still thought at this point, this would be, my husband was on the partner track at this accounting firm. And we were kind of, set as far as, okay, we're going to start a family, hopefully in the next few years. And that was really my dream job, to be a mom. And so anyway, my partner at the time, eventually she got pregnant after we were doing it out of our house for about a year. And so she was like, I'll keep doing this till I have the baby. And then I'm out. And I was like, okay, no big deal. So she stopped doing it. And then at that point, we kind of thought, if we're going to keep this going, let's kind of rebrand it. And so that's when it became Ashley Max. And that's in 2007 when we found our first location in Bluff Park. And it was a little tiny catering kitchen. And we had a small storefront where it was just going to be for people to either come pick up their catering, or eventually our catering customers started asking, yes, I love having your poppy seed chicken delivered, but can I get like a small container for my family? And so that's how our Gourmet to Go was born. So
before you keep going, there's so much to package there. So what I love about everything you just said, and no matter if I talk to you or almost every entrepreneur I've talked to or had the honor to really talk to, one thing I never hear, and it sounds so crazy because they probably taught you this in that business school, build a business plan, have this financial projection, laid out in front of you. But the truth is, in the real world, very few people do that. They follow their heart, they follow their passions, and that passion generates work ethic and usually results. So right. I'm assuming you didn't have a 45
We did not have a 5-year plan. We did not. In fact, I remember early on kind of even thinking like, what are we doing? Like, what have we gotten ourselves into,
Right.
So yes, you're right. There was no big plan out there. And so, yes, it was definitely born out of a passion and just, wow, people. I mean, I remember telling friends and family, this is crazy. Like, I'm just making like I'm not a chef. So I wasn't making anything super fancy. And I was kind of like almost blown away that people were so excited about everything.
Yeah.
And which was encouraging, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, I make a good chicken salad and I can make strawberry cake. And so anyway, but yeah, so back to the Bluff Park. So then we started, that was kind of where our Gourmet to Go was born, because out of demand, it was something that wasn't we're going to start a restaurant and have all these, have the Gourmet to Go and the catering and the restaurant. And so in Bluff Park, that was in 2007. And then in 2010, we found our Cahaba Heights location. And once again, that was kind of out of demand. People on the other side of town being like, oh, I wish there was something closer. And in between there, once again, long story, but we actually had a little pickup location at my grandmother's antique store in Cahaba Heights. And so that was kind of the bridge to, okay, we have this little location in Bluff Park. We want to put a bigger location, closer to Vestavia and Mountain Brook, that side of town. And then my grandmother was like, why don't you kind of set up shop as like a pickup location? So no kitchen, but sure. People would be that we were only there for about a year, but like that holiday season, it was like there was a line out the door waiting on people to pick up strawberry cakes. I mean, I was the one taking I would deliver, make the cakes, bring them over there, check them out. I was kind of, at that point there was a few employees.
Sure.
So then our Cahaba Heights store in 2010. So this is the best part about this story. You walk in and it was already a kitchen. So we had to kind of do a little bit of renovation, but not much. That was a saving grace. It was the hoods that are $10,000 were already in there, and so it was a place we could afford. And so we go in, we have the big catering kitchen. There's a big front where we can put our freezers and our Gourmet to Go. And so I'm like, this is great. I have a huge catering kitchen, which was the big part of our business at the time. We have bigger fridges and freezers so that now, people can come in and get their Gourmet to Go. And my husband, Andy, we walk in, he's like, well, there's tables and chairs up here. Like, why don't we just serve the menu? And I looked at him and I was like, that's a restaurant. I've never worked in a restaurant. I don't want to own a restaurant. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, why can't you just do the menu you do for catering and just serve it out the front? Makes it sound real easy to the guy that only does the business side. And,
the accountant. Yeah.
Yes. And so I was like, you're making this sound very easy. But he's like, well, we're paying for the square footage. He goes into the accountant side. We need to pay for this. And so anyway, so that's where our restaurant kind of first cafe was born, because until then, like I said, it was all catering, pickup stuff. So I actually recently found my notes from opening Cahaba Heights, and I had a list of like, the tea machine, the drink area, like what are we going to, containers, are we going to have the straws? I mean, I had not done any of that, servers, are we going to do numbers? Are we going to call out a name? I mean, there was just all those things, especially coming from me that hadn't worked in the industry or in that side of the industry. Just all the, things I had to learn on the fly. So a restaurant was definitely not inside of your plan.
I sure did. So I majored in mechanical engineering and I got an MBA, stayed on campus for that. But when I was in engineering school, I was on a very small team that was chosen to start a business on campus. And we had a blast with it. We called it Hangovers Video Services, still media. So some things just don't change. Our business model was to go out and take video of the Greek systems parties, sororities and fraternities and their crazy parties, and then to sell the video back to them. And guess what? That was a failure. We suddenly found out they didn't want to be on camera and didn't want these parties recorded. So that was my first failure right there. But I still have a T-shirt for the effort.
I liked it. I bet there were some interesting memories that you have from those days, watching those parties go down. Well, we all have a little entrepreneur in us, even when we're at that age. We probably don't necessarily call it that. You probably didn't call it entrepreneurism, but there's always this sort of hustler mentality inside of us that we eventually use in a professional manner later on as we grow into adulthood. And so kind of take us, how you left this really highly technical field of mechanical engineering to digital media and journalism. When did that transformation start to occur?
That is a great question, and I get that question a lot. So in the MBA school, I really found a lot of passion for marketing and for the entrepreneurism. And I, computers were kind of just coming on the scene. I went to school in the 80s at Alabama. And so, the technology for digitizing was still in its infancy. Fortunately, after graduate school, I had an offer to start with AT&T and be part of they had a corporate rotation program that would expose you to all kinds of different situations and people and kind of throw you into the fire. It was called a high risk, high reward program, and you either got promoted fast or fired fast. And I was really attracted to that idea. I was like, I love a challenge. And I thought, hey, I'm going to work hard and I'm either going to make it or I'm not. So that was kind of my toe into the water into kind of a technology business. And I started out in leadership and was managing a group of data center technicians on midnight shift. Because what they do to the new kid on the block. And so I had a dozen 65-year-old guys who were very kind to me. They could have been mean, looking in hindsight, but they were very sweet and very supportive. That was my first role, kind of getting familiar with giant computer systems. And I was transferred to New Jersey, corporate headquarters for AT&T. And you might remember, where you're younger than I am, but you might remember AT&T was the giant. Back in the 80s, and it went through divestiture, and it was kind of going through some major changes. However, for me, it offered a great opportunity to get exposed, and I volunteered for things I wanted to get involved in. One of them was their email business. So AT&T had an email network that they used internally. And in those days, a lot of companies didn't even really use email. And I supervised a group of 100 or so technicians that were providing tech support for email. And I remember being awestruck by the power of communication over email, that you could write up something, hit one button, and suddenly 200 people get it. And it's powerful, as we all know, and we've all made some mistakes on it. But that was kind of like my first toe in the water with it.
That is so cool. So you were literally there in the infancy when email wasn't a thing, wasn't even a word, probably. It was probably called electronic messages.
I think it was. I think it was called electronic messaging, and there was a new division that opened up at corporate and AT&T, and it was to study the onset of digital services. And I raised my hand and said, I want on that team. Fortunately, I had the ability to be on that first launch team for AT&T's very first dial-up service, and it was called Worldnet. So Worldnet was a service that they sold to businesses and really more business focused at the time than consumer. There was a lot of fear of eroding the telecom business. So, the dial-up service was kind of a B2B business. But we had the strategy of putting content behind a firewall. And as you might know, Ron, and one reason I love this business is it continues to evolve and it continues to change. And I've loved kind of riding all these cycles with it and seeing the evolution of the business. So that was a really fun time to get to launch Worldnet and to be on that business development team of negotiating contracts of content that would be behind this firewall for AT&T.
And you're in your 20s at this time, right? You're still.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
That's a pretty high level position.
It was a lot of fun. And I, looking back, it really was a joy because all of these services were new. There were services popping up, Genie, Delphi, Alta Vista, AOL, all of these behind the firewall services that had content that you would have to join that network to get to the content. And so I subscribed to all of them. I had an account on like 10 of these services. And, it was right at the infancy and it was really a blast.
What's interesting to me, and tell me, I could be wrong here, but what you're describing sounds very similar to what Alabama Media Group created, to have this sort of access to all of this other content through this one platform. Is that what you saw there in the two different companies? And is that what made you make the move eventually from AT&T to Alabama Media?
So that is a great question. In between time, I left AT&T and I moved to San Francisco to take a job with Magellan. And Magellan was one of the first 5 search engines on the internet. And we were, this was in 1995-ish. And search engines, this is pre-Google. So Yahoo was on the roster. There were just a very, very few. Alta Vista hung on for a while. And Magellan. And we came very close to filing for public status and all moving away to an island. However, there was a bigger search engine, Excite, that bought us. So we were consumed by a bigger fish at the time. And I had a choice to make. That was, do I stay with Excite in California or do I do something else? I had a call from one of the largest media companies out of New York, Advance Publications. Advance owns a lot of newspapers across the country, and they had a concept of starting these digital businesses. And since they owned the Birmingham News, the Huntsville Times, and the Mobile Register, they were considering an online service that would accumulate a lot of that content and offer that up for consumers. So, I gave it some thought, and my parents were still here in Bessemer, Alabama. So it wasn't a real hard decision. I decided to move home and start AL.com and worked out of my home for 6 months, attracting people to come to work. And we did have to look out of state for a lot of talent because this was in maybe 1997-ish. And digital talent was hard to find.
Sure.
So we did attract people, and I was fortunate to have started the business in Huntsville, which is a little more tech savvy than some parts of the rest of the state. Although Birmingham is changing and Birmingham is coming up as well.
So there's so much to unpack there. And it's for a nerd like myself who loves business, hearing all those names, how cool was it to be a part of so many of those startups and have the opportunities that probably seemed limitless, in terms of wealth creation and the things it could do for society, things that they did do for society even. Was there just like constant adrenaline pumping all the time being a part of all these startups?
They were very different. The startup in San Francisco had the aim to go public and to gain a lot of wealth. The startup with AL.com was very different because it was privately owned from this advanced company out of New York. So, you weren't going to get rich quick. So the goals were different, and my motivation for it was unique. Becoming part of the community was a real part of the job, and looking more long-term at the growth of the business and the opportunities, and working with our partners, the newspaper companies. I think personally, it was great to have those different experiences, and to be able to see the talent that it attracts, because it does attract different types of people with different goals.
Okay, Birmingham, you just heard it. You heard a story of how someone right here in our hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, built a business from the ground up into massive success. It was an inspiring story, so inspiring that I hope somebody out there uses it to build a business right now, today. If you know of anyone out there that has enjoyed a similar amount of success, please contact them. Tell them to listen to this interview, because we want to talk to them. The entire purpose of this podcast is to inspire entrepreneurs from the Birmingham area to do the same thing. I love entrepreneurship, and I love the city of Birmingham, and I hope somebody out there is as inspired as I am. So thanks for listening today. I want to give a big shout out to Jeremy Allen. Jeremy's the guy behind the scenes doing all the technical work. He has been a godsend, and his creative energy is very inspiring as well. So Jeremy, thank you. And for everyone else, we'll see you again next time on How I Built This, Birmingham Style.